Power BI, my favorite topic. So let's get cracking. So just a quick agenda run through. So there'll be a quick recap of what Power BI is. Some of you might be completely new to Power BI. Others already have some experience, already have done maybe some courses, hopefully on Data Camp, or have some kind of experience through maybe your professional work. What to expect in today's sessions. Then we'll go into the live training as well. And then there's more learning resources, which I'm sure will be shared throughout, but we might cover those towards the end, time permitting. So what is Power BI? Essentially, Power BI is a data analytics tool. It's a business intelligence tool, and its strength lies in data visualization. It allows people with a wide breadth of experience, shall we say, and knowledge to kind of create effectively reports to give insights on whatever data they might be collecting or wishing to analyze. Power BI is one of the most popular business intelligence tools out there, according to Gartner. Each year, they produce this kind of matrix. Each year, Microsoft is up in that top right quadrant there. It is obviously one of many now BI tools, but it has got its strengths in data visualization. It is part of obviously Microsoft's extensive product suite, so it has a lot of strengths going for it. And over 97% of Fortune 500 companies actually use Power BI. And currently, I think these numbers are close to last year, so 2023, it's got over 115 million users worldwide. So it's something that is definitely worth knowing. In today's session, we are going to be, as Richie introduced, analyzing customer churn, and specifically for a fictitious telecoms company called Databell. And what is customer churn? Again, I'll just expand on what Richie introduced. A good way of looking at it, and we have a definition here from Investopedia, but a good analogy is a leaky bucket. So you can kind of envision that the water going in is your new customers. The water that might be leaking out of your bucket are those customers that you're not actually able to retain. So the aim of it is not necessarily to clog up all those holes. I don't think any company is able to stop every customer leaving once they get them in through the door, but it's to slow that rate of leaving down, to slow that rate of loss, so that you are adding more customers to your customer base than you are losing. So we're going to be looking at some visualization, some ways of actually analyzing and maybe creating a dashboard on some customer churn for this fictitious telecoms company, Databell. So we'll get into the live training. There are a few slides here, just in case people are new to Power BI and how to install Power BI Desktop. We will be working with the free version of Power BI. There are others like Power BI Service. There's also Power BI Mobile or Power BI App. But we will be looking at Desktop, which is the free version, and you are able to easily download it from Microsoft's website, as shown here. And there's a section for products where you'll be able to find Power BI Desktop, and there is a link there as well for you to download for free and also select the language that you wish to work in. Once you obviously download it, there is then the option to just install the file. You'll have these kind of windows showing, selecting the language, clicking download, which will obviously download certain files that you can then install. And we will now go straight into some of the dashboard work. So hopefully you'll be able to, if you've downloaded the material and you're following along, or if you might download it later, this is where we currently are with our file. So I've already prepared some of the things. We've already done some data preparation. We won't necessarily be looking at the data preparation aspects of a data set, because once we load any data, whether it's for our own personal projects or within a company, there might always be things that we need to update, whether it's new columns, whether it's measures, whether it's other things that we want to add. We did a quick check already, as you can see from these visuals, about the number of customers in our database. So we have 6,687, and they're all unique. So we've already done a kind of deduping. So we've checked that there are no duplicates, there are no repeat rows, and we can carry on with our analysis, safe in the knowledge that nothing's going to be skewing it and there's nothing being added or kept in error. Just to quickly go here to data view. So we're currently in the report view. of Power BI. There's three main views of Power BI, the third being model view. So in our data view, we can see the actual data that we have. So this is Data Bell's data. It was taken at a particular it's like a snapshot in time, and it is to do with the customer base at that particular point. So we have all customers here. We have their customer IDs. There's plenty of columns. We will obviously be introduced to some of them as we carry on. We won't go through all of them now and explain them because that would probably take too long, and I have plenty planned and plenty I want to get through. But essentially, this is our data set, and some of the key information is the churn label. We have a yes and no here, so if this customer churned or not. So we have a comparison, and we are able to compare customers that have either churned or haven't, which is good when we do some profiling maybe as part of a churn analysis to see what the differences are between the customers that churn and those that don't. We have also created some calculated columns already. So this here churned, as we can see, there's a little sheet with a kind of sigma, capital sigma. This is our calculated column, and it's right at the end. And essentially what we did is we created an if statement. So here's the if, and we took the churn label, which as we saw was either yes or no, and we've made a flag of it. Now this is much easier when it comes to using that churn label and referencing it. It's easier to reference if it's a number instead of having to type out each time yes or no when we wish to create any kind of measures or extra columns. So we did that as a step already. So that's already there. Another step, we'll go to the report view, that's already kind of done is this little table. And it has a number of measures. Now measures, I just showed a calculated column. A calculated column basically can apply to each row in a table, and it actually becomes part of the model. For a measure, when we create them, they kind of are more dynamic. You can imagine them as sitting on top of the model. And they can be one specific number. They can then have different filters applied or variables. And it's much easier to, especially for calculations and aggregations, to create measures that then you can easily input into your visuals. And instead of having to add them through your table that you will then have to aggregate anyway at some point maybe, or sum if they're numbers, numeric data types, etc. So we have some measures here already, and they've already been used actually in these card visuals here. We can see these ones. So we have number of customers, which is just taking account. So using the DAX here, so we can use DAX, which is Power BI's kind of formula language, syntax expressions for aggregations, for basically manipulating your data, adding things to your model and creating different kind of calculations. So we've kind of done a count already of the customer ID. That has given us our total numbers. We also, as you can see here, did a distinct count of customer ID, and that was just to check there was no duplicates. We have number of churned customers. So this was actually a sum of the data churned. So another benefit of making turning the churn label into a 0 and 1 was that then we can actually apply an aggregation on it, and we can just sum that number, and we have wherever obviously the customer had churned 1, they will then be counted towards the total. And finally, we have a churn rate already, which is the division of number of churn customers by the total number of customers. So those are the things we have. We'll add a new page here at the bottom. We can double click on it and rename it to, let's say, dashboard for now. And let's start building some more visuals related to our actual churn analysis. Let's make a card. So we can just resize it. So a little card here, and I'll just drag the number of customers because it's always good to see high level what customers are, because we might start applying some filters. We might have visuals where we then select certain variables within those visuals that we want to see actually how many customers are in that group. We might be looking at percentages and not actually understand the size of that particular group of customers in our overall customer base. So we'll add a number of customers there. And then we'll add another. If I drag churn rate, number of churned customers, automatically Power BI makes it a bar chart. So then we can just quickly, sorry, and easily change it to a card. So that's all well and good, but it doesn't look that nice. It's automatically taken the name of the field as the actual label here. We can change that by clicking on the downwards arrow here in the field section for this visual and rename for this visual. We can say total customers. Perfect. We can do the same here and say total churned customers. Lovely. Now, there's another way of doing labels for cards. That's the category label. We also have a title, which we can add on the top, turn it on, toggle it on, and add a title here. And it actually appears like that. So there's different ways of doing the same thing, essentially, in Power BI. We don't want that. We'll keep it underneath. But that is just to show, again, apologies, that there are different ways of doing the same things in Power BI. They're all right. Everything, there's nothing wrong with either. It just obviously will depend on preference. It depends on maybe the analyst creating the dashboard, or there might be specific guidelines for a company. Let's add one more card and then we'll move on. So that's the churn rate. It's currently in a decimal. That's how it's been calculated. But if we click on the actual variable, we can format it here. So let's click on percentage. Lovely. We'll make it, we can change the decimals, we'll make it 1 decimal. There we go. Okay, so let's move on to something else. Now, we have in our data as well, if we scroll through, I think it's actually here, there's a column called churn reason. So another important part of doing any kind of analysis, especially when it comes to customers churning, is if the information is available, to actually know why people are actually leaving. So here we have churn reason, and we can drag it again onto our canvas area. It's basically a data type full of string information, as we can see here. Apologies, I'm actually got COVID at the moment, so please excuse my voice and sore throat. So we can see a list of different churn reasons. Now, we also want to see it based on churn rate. So we can actually change it to let's change it to a clustered column. And we go to our other table, find churn rate here. We can add it to our y-axis. Now, we actually see that churn rate is 100% because these are actually going to be reasons for churn. And this one here is where someone probably hasn't churned. So we will actually use number of churned customers here. Perfect. So now we'll be able to actually report on which are the highest reasons for people churning. We can see already that competitor made a better offer is the top reason given by customers who have churned. It's not an ideal visual if you were going to obviously create this dashboard for someone else to view. It'd have to be someone who knows very clearly that you can interact by hovering over. And also, if you kind of go over the actual description in the x-axis, you can see the full description. We would prefer to kind of display that information a lot more easier so that someone doesn't have to necessarily interact just to read something, shall we say. So what we can do here is add a filter. So in this filter pane here, we have number of churn customers and churn reason. We'll click on churn reason, that downward arrow, so we can open this, collapse it, and we will use in the filter type top N. Now we will ask to see the top 5 churn reasons, and then by which value is basically what the filter requests here, and we will add the number of churn customers because that's what we're actually visualizing as well. We can apply this filter, and there we go. Much easier to read. We actually now can see the information and the reasons very clearly straight on first viewing. And we can see that there is actually 2-3 categories, then there's a don't know, 2-3 categories that are above significantly the others. Competitor made a better offer, competitor had better service devices, and the attitude of support. So when it comes to competitor made better offers and competitor had better devices, that's obviously something that's important to raise with colleagues, shall we say, in Databell, because then it can be something that can be put in the strategy for retention, maybe introducing different offers. Further competitor research needs to be done to ensure that any offerings that Databell has, they are either as competitive or better for customers. The attitude of support person is, again, something that can be controlled. Maybe there's issues in the call center at Databell, and employees or the call service agents might need to be retrained, for example. So this is very important information straight away that we can basically gain from one specific visual. Now, in general, we're looking here for this particular customer churn analysis because, as I said, there's a lot of data that we have, and there's different ways to approach this. Again, we're going to be looking more at the kind of services that the customers have instead of the profile of the customers, in the sense of maybe where they live, their ages, kind of other demographic information. That, again, is an important part of customer churn. And if you're doing an overall deep dive in a kind of churn analysis for a company, you would go into those depths and add those aspects. For now, we'll look mainly at kind of the reasons customers have given for leaving and some information about the actual products and services that they've been using or how long they've actually been at the company. So one of those is that we can do, let's just minimize these. We can expand the panels here as well, so we can see the variables a bit better. So we actually have account length in months. And then I believe that's the main, yeah. So that's the best way to actually find, shall we say, tenure for someone. So if we added this down here, we'll get just one particular column. And let's just, to see how this looks, let's add, we'll open the visual pane now because we need to see the information related to this particular visual that we've selected. We'll move it to x-axis. There we go. And in the y-axis, we actually want to see how many customers we've got in each. So now we can see that how many customers, or basically the split of our customer base in terms of tenure. You can see that 1 month actually has the highest number of customers, regardless of if they've churned or not. So this is actually our total customer base that we're looking at. And then it goes naturally, it goes downwards. We reach a point at 20 when there's a little peak, 21. And then we have a kind of peak towards the end where we've got some longer tenure customers who are over 70 months with Databell and with the company. So they've got products, mobile products that they've been around with for a long time. So if we had this particular graph, it's good to tell us a bit about our customer base. Doesn't necessarily add anything yet for our customer churn analysis. We can actually create a kind of combo chart by clicking on this line and stacked column chart. So we already have part of the information in here. The one thing we need to add is the line y-axis. So we'll add the churn rate to the line y-axis. So now we've got two axes, so one on the left, one on the right here. The first one is the columns, and it's our number of customers, and the one on the right is actually the churn rate, so it's a percentage, which is great to be able to see different variables on the same visual. We could have done this by creating two visuals, but it also is great to see that variables that might be connected in some way, whether it's between products or profiles or anything else, can actually be easily visualized on one particular graph. So we can see that actually churn rate drops as the tenure or as the account length of the customer increases. But it's not, I wouldn't say it's the clearest as well. I would struggle. Maybe you are struggling to see it as well on your screen. But it's not easy to see kind of and make out any kind of real patterns with so many data points within our x-axis. If this was like a deep dive or an insight analysis or something that you were doing as a one-off or an ad hoc, you might create something like this, make it a lot bigger, put it on its own page, and that would work fine. As we're creating a dashboard where we want to have multiple visuals and need to take up less of the canvas real estate, it needs to be much smaller, and we need to find a way to make it clearer for the viewer. One way of doing that is actually grouping. So we can try and group some of these. Now, in telecoms and in general, maybe in other kind of subscription-based companies, you're going to have tenure of customers that goes into the years. So it might be that there's actually already specific groupings of customers that are used. So 0 to 3 months, and then 4 to 6, that kind of bracket up to a year. And then it might actually increase from 1 year to 2, 2 to 5, those kind of things. Now, obviously, if that's the case, you use those, and the data can be split into those. There's different ways of creating those kind of formulas. You can use, obviously, if, but we will right-click on our account length, and we will create a new group. And now this pops up, so we can put account. We can actually name our new group. We'll put account length. Let's put tenure like this, and then leave it in months so that we know that the bins that are created are months still. We've got different bin types. We can have a list of things. Basically, a list allows you to kind of choose different options and add it into a particular group. We want a bin because we want it to be done a lot quicker. There's over 70 data points. It will take too long to add each one individually into a group that we want. Now, it shows us also the minimum value, so that's 1, and the maximum is 77. And now we can actually see the bin size. And this splits the overall data points into groups. We can either do it by size of bins, so how many values are in each bin up until a point, or the number of bins. So if we had like 100, let's say, data points, and we wanted 4 bins, we could change that to number of bins and add 4, and it would create those 4 bins of most likely 0 to 25, 26 to 50, and so on. We will leave size of bins, and we will put 6. So hopefully this is kind of, if it was starting from 0, it would be 0 to 6, 7 to 12, and so on in terms of months. So we'll click OK. And then this will be created down here. So we can see tenure in months bin. Now, let's actually see what's going on. And this is a good little data check, essentially, calculation check as you're doing analysis. Just created another page. We can drag account length. Now, it gives us this graph straight away. We want a table to see them all. And also, we can click on the downwards arrow, and it's automatically summing it. We'll click Don't Summarize so that we get a list of all of the actual data points within that particular metric. Now we can also add tenure to this table, and to see very easily how the bins have been split. So the first bin, actually 0, which is kind of labeled because it starts from 0, actually goes from 1 to 5. Our bin size is 6, but there's no actual 0 for it to start. And then the next value, 6, is what it wants to start the new bin on. So you can see actually there's 6 data points within the second bin because it can go from 6 to 11. And then it carries on, so on and so forth, all the way down to our final bin, which is 72, and it goes from 72 to 77. So actually it finishes perfectly on a bin with the size 6. It just starts on one with 5, which is fine. As long as you know these things, you're clear when you're doing any analysis and can explain it or add caveats, it's perfectly okay. We can close this page, delete it by clicking that cross. That's a great little check that we can carry out. Now we can actually change the x-axis, add the tenure that we created, the bin, into the x-axis, and now we have a new visual. Essentially, we've reduced the size of the x-axis, and it's much clearer to see that, yes, our customer base is mainly either 0 to 5 months, or 1 to 5 months, essentially. And then we also see a peak at 66 months and over. And the longer a customer stays with the company, the lower the churn rate is. We do see a slight uptick at around 30 months. So that is kind of, if we've got maybe a product that's 2 months subscription contract, maybe towards the end of that, or once they go past there, customers aren't renewing. Or customers are renewing or have other options and can get out of the contract quicker. There might be certain things there and reasons that we can start investigating. So that is a great little kind of visual that can show us certain things to look into. We can also make this visual a bit nicer. If we go to the format visual here, format your visual, we have lines down here, the lines option. We won't apply, well, it says all, so that's fine. Let's go to colors and we'll change the color here. You can change it to, let's say, red to make it stand out. So now we've changed that. And we can also add a bit of shading underneath. So this is a better looking visual. It catches the eye. We can see the changes better. We can also actually go back to the visual, go to lines, and let's make a dashed line. And now we kind of see, making it clearer that, and we can play around with the formatting. There's loads of formattings that you could do. Let's make it a bit lighter so it's not dominating the blue underneath. But now we can see, obviously, the legend here shows us the number of customers and the churn rate. We've got the different values, and we can easily kind of understand and see certain information that has been presented from this visual and that can help make certain decisions. At this point, I think it's probably a good, I think we're kind of halfway through. Might be a good place if there's any particular questions.
Yeah, we've got 2 questions from the audience so far, and for anyone else who has questions for Yasin, please do ask them in the chat. So first question comes from Samantha. So Samantha asks, can you set this up to continuously update the dashboard, or have you got to upload the spreadsheet each time you want to update it?
There is this, for this particular spreadsheet, when it's working on desktop, when you're working with spreadsheets, it would have to be kind of kind of a manual job, essentially. All I could do is here, click refresh, and it would refresh it. It would work better with a database connection. Excel, I would have to either upload the new Excel or the CSV that we've used and then have to click refresh. If I've got a live database connection, SQL or any kind of, there's over 100 data sources. But if you've got a data source that's you've connected to directly and that you're able to pull the tables from, either with a kind of a custom query or any kind of other way, then yeah, you can just click refresh and it will update any kind of connection that is feeding into that particular report. That would be if you're working on your own kind of operating software, because obviously Power BI Desktop is a very much a individual operating kind of tool. When you use Power BI Service, there's lots of other ways of refreshing, scheduling refreshes, and doing other types of refreshes for whether it's the data source or the report or any apps that feed off of that data source. So in a nutshell, you can very much, it just depends on what reason you're using for, what reason you want to refresh, and obviously what kind of tool you're using in terms of Power BI.
That's a great answer. And so for people wanting to learn more about that, I believe the course, is it data connections in Power BI if you're wanting to learn how to hook your database up?
Yes,
All
so
right.
there's data connections Power BI. There's also deploying and maintaining assets in Power BI, another course that deals more with Power BI Service. And we do have a course coming up, I think, in the next quarter, Power BI for end users, where again, it will be dealing more with how you can digest information from Power BI as the end user.
Okay, so plenty to look at there. I think if you click on the resources in the link there, there's a link to the data analyst with Power BI career track. All those courses are within that track. So if it's something you're interested in learning more about, then please do take a look at that career track. Okay, next question comes from Cynthia. Can we use categorical data? I'm not quite sure of the context of when this question was asked.
Yeah.
Cynthia, if you want to add more details in the chat, let us know. Otherwise, do you want to talk about how you might make use of categorical data in a churn analysis?
Yeah, you can use that. Obviously, that definitely can. There's different ways of using the categorical data. We obviously use some kind of category information here in terms of the churn reasons. So there's different kind of methods. Let me just quickly. We do have different information. There's kind of, depends obviously on what data you've collected. But yeah, essentially there's plenty of categorical data here that can then, as we've kind of done with the bins, even though that's not necessarily categorical data, that would be more numeric style kind of data in terms of the account length, but we're using it here as a category. And you can create more bins. We will do a few more kind of examples of the categorical data, but there's different kind of information that might be already in categories that are easily applied to your database, and other kind of numeric values and metrics that you can split it, or there's information that you might then need to carry on segment or use as segmentation and create extra categories yourself. But I think it is definitely one that a data type at least, and a type of information that I'd used regularly in any kind of customer churn that I've done in the past within a business. So I would say it's an important aspect of any kind of churn analysis.
Absolutely. Maybe one of the type is splitting your customers up into different cohorts. So perhaps when they started, and you've got different groups there to analyze.
Exactly. Yeah.
Plenty of opportunity for dealing with categorical data here.
Yeah.
Have a play around, see what you can think of. Okay, so next question comes from Amaranta saying, could we add the dollar value or whatever the currency value of the churn represents, just to urge the organization to do something?
Yeah.
Is that something you would normally do, adding a quantity rather than just a churn percentage?
That's it. Again, definitely depends on the situation. We will, if I do get, depending on time, but I will show another example anyway. But maybe you would probably, at this level, or depending on the level, you could easily use a kind of monthly charge, or average monthly charge, or a total charge of a customer lost, and kind of average that over your customer group. The kind of, obviously you can look at your kind of decay curves. You can have lifetime value of customers lost. You can definitely go into those depths. It would just depend very much on your remit as an analyst at a company doing this kind of churn. In the past, I know that maybe the more kind of monetary values of churn have kind of come under certain things that finance department would deal with. So maybe a financial analyst would be doing that. Whereas if you're working, let's say, in the trading department, the marketing department, you might actually be looking more at the actual makeup and demographic of a customer churning. So you wouldn't necessarily go down the kind of rabbit hole of the finances. You might touch the certain top level, as I said, of maybe it's the plans and the average of the amount lost per customer on a kind of high level basis.
Yeah, I think you're right there. So actually, if anyone wants to ask business questions about churn as well as like Power BI questions, I used to do a bit of work with the customer success team here at DataCamp, so I'll see if I can remember the answers to all those questions. If you want to ask us at the end, you can do. And if I recall rightly, our customer success team here at DataCamp has targets around the churn rate percentage, but probably like the chief financial officers going to want to know how much the dollar value impact is on the business to churn. So different teams are going to want to see different metrics.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we'll do more questions at the end. I think for now, yes, and do you want to carry on?
Perfect. Yep, will do. Cool. So we have 2 graph visuals. We have 3 cards at the moment, card visuals. So we're looking so far, let's quick recap. Churn reasons, got that covered. Top 5 reasons we can see. We've also got the tenure and the churn rate by tenure for customer accounts. We are dealing mainly, should caveat, with mobile products here. And this is the data set, the telecoms data set. Obviously, telecoms now, a lot of companies cover a lot more products than just, shall we say, mobile or telephony. But we are very much looking at that particular part, those telephone products. So what else we can look at? And something that has definitely been, shall we say, more of a modern age question or concern for telecoms company when it comes to churn is the actual data consumption. So we can actually now look at maybe and see if the consumption of data by our customers is maybe impacting and indicating who might churn more. So, apologies again. Let's go back to our data view and have a quick look at what we have in our data here. So we can see there's some charges, there's international plans. We have average monthly GB, which is the obviously gigabytes downloaded. And we have this one here, unlimited data plan. So depending obviously on your location in the world, a lot of companies are moving to kind of offering unlimited data. They do offer, I think, a lot of the time, unlimited minutes, unlimited messages. But data has definitely become important because you can actually do calls and text send messages using your data. So a lot of people can actually purchase data SIMs that don't even have the ability to make calls and messages because they can do all that with an iPad, an Android phone. There's all kinds of models out there. I won't go through them because no one is actually sponsoring me for that. So we do have an unlimited data plan, which is great. And we have our average monthly GB download. So let's use those. Now, if we go back, sorry, if we look at this column, just quickly here, again, we have a lot of numbers. So we're most likely wanting to actually group it again. So we can right click on our table here, which is our main model. And we can click on new column. So we're going to create a calculated column here. A measure wouldn't work here because we want to actually now put each customer into a group based on their average monthly GB download. So we'll call it grouped consumption. So this is just, let's give it a better grouped data consumption. Again, with names, there are obviously definitely best practices with naming conventions, whether you're working in Power BI or any other kind of analysis, data analytical program, software tool. But in general, making sure that it's clear. Ideally, no spaces in this, so I am not keeping to best practices. Something like this would definitely be better. to ensure that there's maybe no trailing or leading spaces, which can obviously impact when you're referencing columns or values for additional metrics or variables that you might be creating. So we want to group our different consumptions. As we saw, it's a list of numbers, but we'll use if. So we'll use the if statement. Again, when you type something in Power BI, it is helpful. It will give you kind of the syntax of what it's expecting and a message about what the actual DAX syntax or function does. So we will want to reference the average monthly GB download. So you can actually just start typing something that's in your table, in your data set, and it will find it like that. So we can just click on that right there. Now we'll say if anything's less than 5, we will say it is less than 5 GB. We'll put it in double quotes like this because it is actually a string. So we want to make sure Power BI is aware of that. The actual column is an integer, and that's why the 5 didn't need any kind of punctuation or anything around it. We will actually nest this if statement because we want to create 3 categories of grouped data consumption. So then our first one is if everything is under 5, we want it to go into this group, which is less than 5 GB. Then if anything is less than 10 after that, so it will first go through and find anything under 5. If it's 5 but under 10, we want it to actually go into another group called between 5 and 10. These aren't probably the most snappiest of names for groups, but they will do. And finally, we want a result if neither of the 2 criteria are met. So our first criteria is under 5. Then Power BI will basically look and say if it's over 5 but under 10, it will go into the second group. And then we want anything else to go into a group that is 10 or more GB. So we will put our first bracket. And another thing that the syntax will, and Power BI in the formula bar here that we're working in, it will actually highlight the bracket here that we've got, and it's saying it's for the first if. So if we press return here, it would actually give me an error because I need a second one to close it off completely. So now this is a nice formula that's been closed off. We can press return or the kind of buttons here, the options to commit. And here we have our grouped data consumption. So let's just quickly add grouped data consumption to the canvas. I thought I had, there we go. So it's given us a table, that's fine. We want to see the churn rate for this. So let's go to our churn rate. And this is the good thing of making measures at the beginning. There are other ways of doing them, obviously, but by making the measures that you kind of, and key important things that you want to use, it's easy to do it throughout as you're building your story and as you're building your analysis. Cool, so it's created a table. We can make it look nicer. Let's make it into this bar chart. Nice, so now we have a visual that shows us the churn rate. Let's actually now add, because that was the whole point that we flagged that before, our unlimited data plan. We can add it here. So now we've got the visual selected, we've got our visualizations panel open here, and we can see the different options. Let's add unlimited data plan to the legend. Perfect. So now it actually splits it, and we can see that customers who didn't have unlimited plan are light blue, customers who did are dark blue. Just quickly before we actually look into what it's showing us, we can see here that it actually starts at less than 5 GB, then it goes to 10 or more, which is actually our top category, and then it goes to the middle category. It's obviously trying to, and we can see more options here, sort the axis. If we go to that one, we can see it like this, or we can see it ascending. Now we can actually make it more make more sense essentially based on the actual category information. So we start less than 5G, then between 5 and 10 gigabytes, and then 10 or more gigabytes. So now this looks much more sensible in terms of how we can interpret it, reading it up or reading it down. And depending on your category you can use, you should be able to do this. But if you can't, another trick is to always maybe add, because we're creating strings, it's looking at it alphabetically. It's taken L as the last thing or first thing alphabetically, then B, and then it's actually taking a number. Another way to do it, you could easily add, let's say, letters to your categories like I'm doing here. I've just clicked on the calculator column we made, and I'm editing it straight in the formula bar. I can put a B in front of the second one and a C in front of the third one. Click commit, and it will update like that. So now we've got it going from A, B, C. If we go to sort axis again, we can sort it descending, and you'll see it's CBA like this. So that's just some obviously ways of making sure that the information in your visuals are displayed in the way you want them. From the actual visual, we can see that customers using less than 5 GB but are paying for an unlimited data plan are churning at a rate of 35%, which is roughly 10% higher than the actual churn rate across the customer base. So straight away, again, we can see even for the between 5 to 10 GB, there's 33. And even for the 10 or more for the unlimited plan, it's much closer to the general, the overall churn rate for the customer base, but it's still quite high. Now, these customers here, less than 5 GB, are maybe the ones that instead of losing them completely, the company would want to maybe go and communicate with them and ask them if they maybe wanted to downgrade. Maybe they don't need to be paying for unlimited data plan. Fine. Instead of losing the customer completely, the company would prefer to at least readjust their plan and the amount they're paying so that they can keep them and it makes more sense for the customer. Instead of having this massive difference between the no data plan and the yes, and those that are using less actual data from their mobile product. So that's all looking good. Now, what else we can do is add some filters. It's all well and good having Power BI, which is a strong and very dynamic and powerful data visualization tool, but one of its strengths is obviously its interactivity. So let's rearrange some of these cards and let's add some slicers. We're going to click here on this little icon here. The first slicer we can actually add is churn label. So this is obviously if they churned or not. Now, a lot of our information here is actually related and is already using churn rate. So if we picked yes as the churn label, then it would either go to 100%, or if we pick no, it would show no data at all in the visuals. But what we can do, first we will format this differently. We can click, once we've got the slicer selected, we can click on this format visual and then to slicer settings. And there's an option here which shows us the style. We'll pick a tile. And now we can basically see these tiles. As I said, if we go to no, it kind of pretty much shows everything as 0. If it goes to yes, we can see actually everything pretty much as it should be. Here we can see it's all 100. Here we just see the number of churned customers because they all churned. So that makes sense. What we can do, because we wouldn't want necessarily someone to be able to click on no and then be like the dashboard's broken. We can actually go to format at the top here, and with the slicer selected, edit the interactions. So now we can see once we press edit interactions, it stays selected and it changes how visuals interact. So with the slicer, we can leave the total customers. We don't need that to be affected by the slicer, so we click none. The other option is to filter it. We'll do the same here. We'll do the same for this visual here, but we'll leave this because it actually shows number of customers and the churn rate in general. That will kind of go to 100%, but at least we can see the number of customers who have churned or not churned, what tenure is across the customer base. And this will make more sense as well for some other visuals we might add. So if we now click off the edit interactions, we can see that if we click no, only this visual changes and this one. If we click yes, again, only this card here and the bottom one. So you're able to actually play around with the interactions of your visuals. You can do it from a graph to other graphs or a graph to other cards. Because if we clicked on this one, it will affect it. But if we edited the interactions, like let's say, turned it not to affect that, once we click there, again, we see that it doesn't affect it. So it's a great way of actually controlling the interactivity of making slices and aspects of your dashboard or the report very much kind of separate between each other. Let's add one more slicer. I think we'll have time for one. And this is actually the contract type. So another important part of any mobile product or any kind of subscription product is the actual contract duration that the customer has signed up for initially and that they will be paying for, or that the company will be calculating the value that they will be getting from that customer's contract duration. In mobile, the main two are pay as you go, so that would be month by month, and then a contract. So it might be 1 year, usually it's 2 years, but here we can see contract type. We have 3 different categories. But we actually want to make a slicer for 2 categories. Now we can we can use if again, like we did before. Apologies. Or we can use another DAX function called switch. Let's call this contract category. And switch, whoops, there it is, essentially does the same thing as an if, but you don't need to have, sorry, not an if by itself, but a nested if. So you don't need to keep nesting ifs and keep adding them and keep adding them. If you have a category with many values in them that you want to change or group. So what we will do is say, we're looking at the expression contract type. So the values that we're changing are in this particular column. And the value in contract type, that is year 1, we want it to become yearly. So we're saying that there's a yearly contracts and then there's a different type of contract. So 2 years, we're adding another value from the contract type column. So 2 years, make sure always we have to make sure the values are written in the syntax as they are in the columns, otherwise it won't recognize them. Also becomes yearly. And then otherwise monthly. So this is the else part that we can see here that needs to be in the syntax. Missing a double quote, there we go. So now it's saying that if it's year 1, it will be yearly. If it's 2 years, it will be yearly, otherwise monthly. We can click return. And there we go. We can see it in our actual data model because this is a calculated column. If we drag it here, it becomes a table. We can go to our visualizations pane and make it a slicer. We won't reformat it for the sake of time. But now we have another filter essentially. And we can see that the difference between churn rate of yearly, which is 6.6%, and monthly, which is 46. Now, when viewing these churn analysis visuals, sorry, you would expect monthly to be high because that's the whole nature of it. It's a kind of easy to get in, easy to get out kind of product. But this might be too high for the company's targets. The yearly looks good, but again, they might have set a 5% target. So by adding these kind of categories, by adding these slices, you're actually 3 graph visuals, 3 card visuals, you're able to get a lot more information and get a lot more insight. I think at this point, because we're coming to close to the end of the time, it's a good place to stop and see if there's any more questions.
All right, just in time there. We are coming up to the hour. So thank you very much. That's a cool dashboard in the end, and
Cool.
it's the sort of thing that's going to have like a lot of business value.
Yeah.
All right, before everyone dashes off, in case you didn't see the link in the chat, we have got a virtual conference next Thursday called Radar. It's all focused on data and analytics. We have a lot of big speakers for you. It is free to attend. It is well worth showing up. Please do click on the either in the chat or on the QR code at the top left of the screen. Sign up for that. The other thing is that because we've got the conference, there are no webinars next week. In the following week, we've got a session on data storytelling. So that's going to be a fun one to sign up for. So yeah, please do come back in a week or so, sign up for our future events. All right, with that, we have just got time for one or two questions, I think, from the audience. So this one comes from Stefan saying, how do you add buttons or toggleable filters to a Power BI dashboard to make it more interactive?
Cool. Yeah, there's loads of options for that. We didn't necessarily go through it, but essentially there's a whole insert menu here. And you can add kind of Q&A, you can add text boxes. So if you want to add a title, you can do that, where you can also add hyperlinks into it. And then again, as the asker mentioned, there's buttons that you can add again that you can either hyperlink to different pages within your dashboard. You can actually even add bookmarks, so saving certain filters that have been applied to a dashboard page, and by the click of a button going directly to those. So you don't need to go through the whole process of choosing every single filter. Again, you can add shapes with the ability to add text in them. There's so many things you can do. Again, I can also show, I know the question didn't ask necessarily, but just to show the difference, here is the actual dashboard from the course. And as you can see, this has got a theme applied to it. So there's color coordination. It's actually been embedded onto a website URL using Power BI service. And you can see that you're able to interact with it as a general public within an office environment, within a kind of project environment. So there's loads of things, unfortunately, would probably take a lot more time. And I don't either think my voice would stand up for that as well.
It's always the problem. We get into a topic and it's like, well, you can only do a bit in and out. There's just too much more exciting stuff to learn.
Exactly.
So go away and take the course. I think that's going to be well worthwhile. Yeah, okay. At that point, I think since there's no questions, we are going to call it a day. I hope to see you all next Thursday. Radar's going to be fun. And then thank you once again to Yasin. That was very, very cool stuff.
Thanks very much.
Excellent. All right. Thank you to Reese for moderating. Thank you to everyone who asked a question. Thank you to everyone who showed up today. Well done for taking an hour for yourself to learn something new.